Please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, 6 o'clock, we are having a workshop. Presentation by Eric Foster of Banks and Company. Eric, are you hearing us?
Yes, I am.
Hey.
Do you want to go through the attendance here or?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Hang on, Eric, 1 second.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let me just put down. Okay, Larry Derry.
Yeah. Thank you.
Tom Hilbert.
Here.
Chuck LaPeter.
Yes.
Norm Foley. Anne Marie Rich, yes. Michelle Woodruff.
Yes.
And Matt
Present.
Rudosi.
You'll get it.
Before I quit.
It's all good. It's quite all right.
Okay, so that,
You got a full board.
we're full board and we will
Is there a stamp in there, too? No.
adopt the agenda.
Print it for me, they put it in my mailbox.
Well, that's the thing, Tom. I'm not sure if we need to do that.
I'm sure
yet,
he's
because
gonna
we-
share
Do you do
his.
the
Okay.
workshop or you, because the way this is set up,
Okay, let's just,
because the
okay, let's,
presentation starts at 6, which is just a workshop. And 7 o'clock is when you get into
okay.
The
the
case.
adoption of everything.
Okay, Eric. Up to, you're on.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to turn this on. Thank you, everybody. My name is Eric Foster. I am with Banks and Company, and we are a public affairs firm headquartered in Michigan, Southfield, Michigan. And we work in a number of different sectors, the commercial marijuana sector being one of those industries where we work with applicants either going through the licensing process, or we have also worked with municipalities that have brought us on to help them draft their ordinances for adult use and for medical marijuana licensing within their community. Through communication with one of our clients in the Alpena area, the Couriers, Kevin and Robert Courier and their family, and our conversation with the township supervisor, we wanted to provide a presentation just to give you some more detail and perspective on the regulatory aspects of licensing and the operations, so that you would have at least more background and information to help you as you're making these important decisions on regulating this industry in your community. And to that, so I want to start off with just saying one of the good things about Michigan is that we do have a core structure of legal statutes that govern both sides of the industry, as well as the personal use aspects and the medical use aspects for individuals. So it's important, for this being the newest entrant into the pharmaceutical sector, that you would have a higher level of regulatory burden as you're going through the proof of concept to ensure that this is an industry that works to meet all the objectives. And we have the 3 laws in place: the 2008 Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, which governs the caregiver and patient role on the medical side; the 2016 Medical Marijuana Facility Licensing Act, which governs the commercial sector licensing for medical marijuana; and then the 2018 Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act, which governs both individual use and commercial licensing for the adult use recreational side. And I usually refer to them as the MMMA, MMFLA, and MRTMA, just for ease of language purposes. So just a few general things relating to individuals and the like. What are some common allowances under all 3 of the statutes? You have the ability for individuals to cultivate up to 12 plants in the confines of their home or on their home property. within both the medical side for patients and on the adult use side for individuals. You can't have more than 10 ounces of raw or cut marijuana on property and no more than 2.5 ounces in your possession if you're away from the home. And that is if you're carrying it on your person, driving in a car or the like. On the adult use side, you can give away to, say, a family member that's at your house up to 2.5 ounces in your residence, but you can't sell it. You can't go into a medical marijuana provisioning center and purchase any products unless you have a medical card. You can, as a landlord, lease property to commercial licensed businesses if you choose to. And products have to be secured to prevent all access from non-permitted individuals, and delivery is only a legal option under one of the legal retail entities, either the provisioning center, the micro business, or the recreational retailer. Any other delivery is illegal. So just a few things on prohibition side: can't drive while under the influence, can't consume or smoke in a public place. The only way that would be permissible is if a community allowed designated consumption establishments. And then in that case, and that's on the adult use side, if you did it, it has to be inside of that physical building only. No extraction by butane, no visible growing. Employees can prohibit, employers can prohibit employees from smoking. Under the medical law, medical marijuana patients can't legally gift any of their marijuana to somebody without a card. The practice of gifting through establishments or clubs, compassion centers, or businesses is illegal, and standalone delivery businesses are illegal. So, state licensing. The state has a two-tier process for licensing. The first is the phase one or step one, which is the background check of both the entity you're going to do business as and the owners of the entity and their backgrounds for criminal, financial, litigation, debt or bad debt management, and other issues that could come up that might negatively impact their ability to run a business. The step two is for the entity and the site-specific facility that they're going to operate within, which requires them to also have municipal approval. You can't get a facility license if you don't have approval from the home community that you're going to operate in, and that home community has opted in for medical or recreational marijuana. So the application process, it's two steps. So going back to the first step, it's a full background check of both the business entity. So even if the entity is either newly created or is an established business entity, as well as all of the supplemental applicants, which would include spouses of any licensees or applicants on an individual basis who have more than 10% of the business. And they vet them for a number of things, including any civil litigation, civil incidents, going all the way into traffic related incidents, all the way up to any other sort of felony areas or the like, bad debts, litigation, have you had a history in business of operating improperly and the like. So it's very rigorous and very detailed, and they go back very, very far and deep in the work that they do before they give a pre-qualification approval. Step two is the facility approval. And as I mentioned before, on both the medical and the recreational side, if the municipality has not given its approval and an attestation in writing that says that the applicant has complied with all zoning, land use, facility and other municipal regulatory requirements, then they are not able to open up under any circumstances. And I'll tell you why that's important in a minute as we get to some of the dynamics that are in that interplay between the medical side and the recreational side. And so this just kind of gives a recap again of some of just the core components of both the step 1 and the step 2, what happens in terms of once documents are submitted, how they review things that they're looking for, as well as the inspections, because both state inspection and local inspection for certificate of occupancy are required steps before the facility can get any final state approval to open up. At the local level, you've got a number of routes that you can go. Most communities go either a hybrid model, which is they'll do a competitive application process, which then will, if approved there, then you have a land use permitting process to move the development forward for the build out, or you'll do just a land use facility process. Either way, in that, municipalities have the ability to build in a number of steps in the process to ensure pre-licensure compliance and a level set for continued regulation of that licensee, so that if an issue occurs and they fall out of favor with local rules, you have the ability to enforce action against them, which could include the forfeiture of their license and local approval and resulting state license and approval. So this just gives a couple of examples of some steps in a community that has opted in for medical, and now they're adding on the adult use licensing. And the reason why I mentioned earlier a unique dynamic is there are people that misinterpret key aspects of the statutory laws that govern co-location with regards to medical and recreational facilities. Their interpretation is that if you're a community that's opted in for medical, that then the statute relating to co-location is somehow a backdoor that forces the municipality to allow recreational licenses without any sort of ordinance, or you have to allow the same exact number of licenses for medical and recreational. That's not the case. Co-location only governs that particular business that has both the local approval for the license. Let's say it's a secure transporter or it's a retail store. They have the local approval and the state step 2 approval. Then they have the ability to co-locate, and you can't prevent them from co-locating, but there's no rights of ownership, licensing, or grandfathering in that are offered or proffered to that entity just because they received the medical license in your community. And this is for, in this instance, with this community, they had multiple tracks with regards to how entities, if they already had state step 1 approved, if they already had a facility license under the medical side, or if they did not, what would be the steps that they would need to go through to apply and meet compliance to potentially open up. So you have the ability to make it as onerous or as straightforward as is allowable and required. Then you have the different license types, which every municipality under both the MMFLA and the MRTMA, you can cherry pick the licenses that you want to allow. One thing we recommend to every community, codify in your ordinance the licenses that you're not going to allow on the adult use recreational side. The reason you do that is because you want it clearly defined so no one can possibly try to use a loophole under MCL 333.27956 to say that because this license wasn't prohibited in ordinance, then I can apply for the license because the municipality hasn't made a determination. It's just easier and simpler. If you're not going to allow retail in your community, just say, these are the retail licenses, we're not allowing them. If it's consumption, same thing. But that just makes it cleaner and easier for you as a township and municipality. Then when it comes to facility requirements, and this gets back to some of the rigor, opening up is not just, I have a building, we got local approval through the site plan process and land use process, and I can just open up willy-nilly. The state has a laundry list of requirements that you have to build in building out your facility. They have detailed presentations that they lay out all of this information. This is just a highlight of a few key slides where they break down and walk through for both medical and recreational for any of the license types, what you have to do in terms of that facility and the different codes and standards you have to meet to be able to be approved for operation. This is all pre-operation and then maintenance for compliance so that you can stay operational and then get renewed at the end of your license because your license is 1 year. And then this just gives some additional details as it relates to the Bureau of Fire Safety with regards to one, the licensing authority that they have, as well as the licensing authority that goes to local communities based on the various statutes that govern municipalities in the state of Michigan and their ability to zone and regulate businesses in their borders. So of course, some of the requirements and why it is rigorous is to ensure that you don't have issues like some of these issues, large electrical feeds from unregulated facilities, more AC, blacked out windows, hazardous environmental operations within that facility, booby traps, security hazards, other issues that could come up if you have unregulated facilities operating in your community borders. Governing statutes. So, as I mentioned before, inside of the two laws, the MMFLA and the MRTMA, there's specific statutory language that governs what municipalities can and can't do. In the MMFLA, it's 333.27205 that speaks to the facility requirements and the compliance with local ordinances that can include things that relate to zoning, land use, and operations, with a caveat of not being onerous or unduly burdensome. On the MMFLA side, you have two particular statutes, 27.959 and 27.956, that govern both setting up the licensing within the local community, as well as the operations and what are the parameters that you put in that relate to state approval and local approval for that facility. Now, one thing to be clear, nothing in either of these two laws severs the ability for any municipality in Michigan to use any of the other statutory and enumerated power provisions that you have for regulating businesses. As we tend to see in entities that sue municipalities for their perceived concerns about the ordinances, they say, oh, well, you put in rules and structure for regulation that aren't in either of those two statutes. You have, as a municipality, as a creature of state government, you have those rights that have been codified in statute, either in the Township Acts, the Home Rule Act, the General Villages Act, or the Charter Villages Act, and the Zoning Enabling Act. You don't give up those rights by opting in. There's not a severability that takes place between the two. Now, zoning, the only thing that's defined as a state requirement is on the recreational adult use side, 1,000 square feet of zoning from a K through 12 facility, unless as a municipality, you decide to make a shorter separation distance. But outside of that, all other zoning is left up to you as a community. And trust me, we have a hodgepodge of separation distances across the 268 communities that have opted in to allow these businesses in their borders. So as I mentioned before, in this particular part, just some of the other statutory provisions that you all have as a municipality that you do not lose just because you're allowing these businesses to opt in. And the reason why I cite some of these is because it's important, as we've learned, for you to make reference to or cite different provisions when you're applying different conditions as a part of your approval process, including things that relate to economic development, health, safety, and other considerations that you would consider for any other type of business that's going to operate in your municipality. The more you cite binding statutes in your ordinance, the better, and the more you immunize yourself against grounds that you could lose if somebody decided, I want to sue. And in reality, there's always somebody upset, but the tighter you make your ordinance, the more effective you are at dissuading them from doing anything about it. Then here's some other particular statutes. As I mentioned, Home Rule Act, General Law and Home Rule Village Act, General and Charter Township Act, and also voluntary agreements between employers and local government bodies. This is how in a number of communities that have put in voluntary economic development agreements in their licensing or economic development requirements or goals for licensees. The sections I mentioned on the previous page relating to, and let me go back to it, the Zoning Enabling Act and those particular sections, and then this particular section of statutory law are usually what gives the standing for you to look to include those provisions in your ordinances. And then, that's why I mentioned here, of course, in terms of the economic development, if you want to put in preferencing where you give qualifying points, but you don't go overboard in terms of the preferencing on a residency basis, what gives you some room to be able to do that in a limited but consistent approach to stay inside of the Dormant Commerce Clause. And then, of course, communities that look to do racial preferencing, that's illegal based on Article 26 of the state constitution. And then just wanted to give you a little bit of feedback on the federal level in terms of the Blumenauer Amendment, which is originally started as the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment, which basically is the federal act in every appropriations bill that protects states that have opted in for marijuana businesses and marijuana patient caregiver programs. It's kind of a backdoor legalization, but I've also included some of the specific language from the most recent amendment that was added to CR in 2020, continuing resolution on a federal budget level. As it relates to banking, these three acts both a Department of Treasury memo in 2014, updated limited SARS memo from the Department of Treasury FinCEN Department in 2018, and the Federal Reserve's financial institution letters from 2015 give the legal structure to allow banks, credit unions to do business with marijuana-based entities. And you have some in Michigan that do, like Union Bank, Dark Bank. There's a few others that do business with marijuana licensed businesses and are public with that. Blue Ox Credit Union is another one. Bank of Michigan is another one. And then I give you all here some information on the Dormant Commerce Clause, because this is something usually when somebody is upset with your ordinance, they will go and try to say that you are violating this particular clause of the US Constitution. The core thing is to, if you're going to do anything that create preferencing or goals to try to incentivize local applicants or applicants from certain socioeconomic classifications, it's all in how you write it to stay inside of the Dormant Commerce Clause so that it's a part of licensing, but not an overall overweighted requirement. And I give some case examples of where people have went too far, and in the case where someone in Traverse City actually has been upheld that they did it the right way. And I give a little bit more background on that. And then this is on the taxation side, because of course you've got the tax on the recreational retail facilities, but then you also have other taxes that apply to any of the licensed businesses inside of your community, and regulatory fees that are also and can be assessed. And then if you're in one of these communities that has the municipal income tax from 1964 that you can charge to businesses and to employees, that's an additional tax that licensed businesses are subject to. And then lastly, just a couple things, because I know in talking with Nathan, there were some questions and concerns about impacts on law enforcement. So looking at data in Colorado, their Department of Justice and Bureau of Investigations has a lot of great data on the cost, arrests, court action, enforcement, stops, raids, etc., since they have both a commercial medical and recreational marijuana industry. And so I wanted to give some highlights from some of their most recent reporting. This chart here shows that arrest, in terms of net arrest, has something that's been trending down since 2012. They became a dual market state, both medical and recreational, in 2015. And so you've seen a decline in arrest. You've seen stabilization in summons, and you've seen basically a slight uptick in warrants that have taken place in the arrest side of of the justice impacts with this industry. Then this here gives you some data on the arrest by type, and so that you can look at age of the different individuals that have been arrested. As you see, there's a decline of under 18, 18 to 20, and 21 and older year over year in terms of those that are arrested or that have other incidental contacts with the justice system in Colorado. Then this here is a study that they did, Healthy Kid Colorado survey on youth risk behaviors, where they studied usage of Colorado high school and middle school students against US high school students in terms of their frequency of use of marijuana usage in the past 30 days. As you can see, for middle school students, it stayed low since they opted in for both medical and recreational at 5.2%. and their high school students have stayed just under the national average at 20.6%. The national average was at 21.7 at the most recent year where data was available, 2019. And then prevalence of 30-day use of different substances. So alcohol being the number one thing that's used by high school students in Colorado, then electronic cigarettes, then marijuana, and then cigarettes and illegal or illicit prescription drugs round out the bottom. And then this just kind of, when you think of this industry, it's very similar to the automotive industry with regards to your raw materials. Your cultivation facility is like your main manufacturing facility. So think the Rouge plant for Ford, but then you also have Ford in Dearborn or Michigan Truck in Wayne. But then you have your product extraction and manufacturing. Those are your processor licenses. So think of that as someone like the seating suppliers or the tier one suppliers that make aftermarket products or products that go into the finished car. Your testing is your R&D. Your retail is your logistics, your distribution. The secure transporters, that's your logistics hub to do all of the shipping between licensees. And then your retail is like your car dealerships. And then you've got all of your ancillary services that are provided by companies that don't have to license, but add to the economic impact induced and indirect from this industry. And lastly, as we've worked in this industry, looking at the investment costs that businesses have to make to get open and be legally compliant, you're looking at anywhere from 2.1 to 4.5 million to start up in year one, to go through the state and local licensing process to meet facility code, to hire competent employees, to have all of the safety, training, environmental hazard protocols for the different core license types. So it's not an industry where anybody can just pop in and run it willy-nilly, as I mentioned. It's a phrase my grandmother used to use. You have to be serious as a applicant or licensee and serious to keep your business open, because you can be shut down by the municipality or by the state if you run afoul of compliance and statutory law. With that, that's it. Any questions?
How do you keep track of all these laws?
Well, thank you. Well, so we have a team internally, and also in part with the work that we do here in Michigan. I personally am also the National Policy Director for Cannabis and Hemp for a trade group, Minorities for Medical Marijuana. So we're looking at these at a federal and at the different state levels. So we have a very detailed database that we keep up to date to stay ahead of laws and or help propose laws to make this more regulatory sound, but then also create win-wins for the businesses, the communities, and the people that are going to work in this sector, and the patients. Any other questions?
I noticed, Denise, you're on the online, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay, do you have anything for Eric?
No, Eric has been very helpful. He provided some comments to the city as well. So those
Okay.
were very helpful, and they're actually going to be looking at some of his comments tomorrow night at their meeting. So
would we be citing all those different laws to sort of protect us from lawsuits within an ordinance that we would be right? You know, like he pointed out, if you have all these different license or laws that over and above what we might add to keep us from, getting sued.
So as I
Yeah,
mentioned,
Yeah,
as I mentioned, like a doctor will tell you, no medicine is foolproof, no ordinance is foolproof. However, our experience has been the more documentation, process, and citation to existing statutory law, the better. People that write a cheap ordinance, those ordinances that are like 6, 7 pages, those are the ones that are the most problematic because so much is left open for interpretation, not proper citations, and then the application and implementation can go off the rails. So you can make unforced errors. It's better to have a longer document that's more detailed with more citation that covers you. So you at least make it more difficult and make yourself better prepared if someone does decide, hey, I don't like this, I want to sue, so they can get, I don't want to say laughed out of court, but there've been some situations, we've seen some municipalities that took our guidance on behalf of our clients, and when people tried to sue, the suing entity, the litigant, got laughed out of court because the judges said, no, everything is pretty clear here, meets statutory and constitutional muster. There's nothing here for us to change.
And you were just saying that we have to be at least as strict as the state law, but we can also have, we have the right to add our little caveats in there to, as we choose is.
Yes,
Or how-
now, you have to, of course, stay in reasonable standards. So here's an example of somebody going too far. My home city, Detroit. I love Detroit, born and raised in Detroit, but as a Detroiter, sometimes we can be a little arrogant and go a little too far. The legacy ordinance that they did for adult use is an example of going too far. Positive intention to try to help incentivize local ownership, but you went too far by writing in that you were withholding X number of licenses to only people that met the legacy requirement. If you would have done like in Grand Rapids, where we helped them write their ordinance, or Muskegon Heights, where we actually wrote the ordinance. If you put in that in your either positioning for the Planning Commission for land use approval, that you were going to order people and give some points that made you higher in the order if you had proof of local ownership, but it wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't a requirement that you had to have it, and it didn't guarantee you a license. And in Muskegon, it was a part of your point opportunity, but it's only 12% of the total points that you could get in their competitive license process, which means you could fail in 20% of the other areas and somebody that's not a resident could beat you. If you set it up like that, you stay inside of the Dormant Commerce Clause. It's not a violation of due process. It's just an incentive that's constitutionally sound. Detroit went too far and said, we're guaranteeing X percentage of licenses for Detroit residents. That was immediately ruled by Judge Friedman. And usually in judicial rulings, they will give you the opinion and the decision at the end of the document when they issue their order. He gave it on page 1. Yeah, this runs afoul of the Dormant Commerce Clause. Y'all went too far. You cannot do that. Now, Detroit is going to go to court in March of 2022. And they're saying we're going to fight it. And Mayor Duggan, who I know and the like, is a good guy. He thinks he's going to win. He's not going to win. If they just rewrote the ordinance, they'd be okay. But they're not. They're stubborn. I know. I lived there most of my all my childhood and a good portion of my adult life. I know how stubborn they are.
Well, what I'm struggling with a little bit is, if this is a legal thing and you offer it it's in a commercial zone, let's say. I don't see how you can deny people under special use at all if they fit the special use requirements. Because it'd be, to me, it's like saying, well, we've got enough auto parts stores, so we're not gonna have any more of those. We don't want any more of this or that in the commercial district, or this, and we only want, 2 marijuana places in the. I don't see how that works if it's legal.
So here's the thing, and that's a great question. So a couple things. First off, at the state level, licensing and renewal of licensing and adding, if you were initially licensed as a medical business and you want to add a recreational license, none of that is a guarantee. There have been medical licensees that have been denied the state recreational license. They can still operate their medical, but they were denied the recreational. There are entities that have been denied their renewal. These licenses are not a guarantee in which you don't have the ability to have grounds legitimately and compliantly with statute to deny. So when it comes down to how you, on the land use side, if you use buffering with sensitive uses, which is something that you do with a lot of businesses, you may do it with liquor stores, you may do it with certain other businesses where you'll have separation distances between sensitive uses. When you run out of space, you just run out of space. And that is legally sound and will stand no matter how many times somebody wants to butt their head against the wall. Separately, if you were to do competitive licenses, as long as you detail the review criteria, the process, the upfront provision of information, and how you handle tiebreakers, you have at least made as clear a process as possible that can stand if someone was to sue. And that is similar in basis and practice as to how you award, say, construction opportunities or other project opportunities where you may only pick 1 or 2 firms out of a group of 10 that might bid on an opportunity. Nothing that you normally would do in the customary role of regulating businesses is illegal for you to do. These are legal businesses, no different than construction companies. But if you're doing a project and you're picking one company to repave a road, the other 10 don't have a right to that opportunity, even though they are legally operated. At the state level, just because you were approved in 2020 for a license, the state doesn't have a legal requirement to renew your approval in 2021 if you're not compliant with rules and regulations. Same with a municipality.
So if we as a municipality just kind of left it open to capitalism, in a sense, that you come in, you find a commercial piece of property, you fit all the criteria that we would like. You're just saying that that doesn't automatically mean that they're still getting it, because the state can turn that down if they don't do all these other things. So really, we are kind of clean then if we just keep it at the level of, well, it's commercial, so sure. Well, I mean, and then there's always so much commercial here. There's only so much room, as you're saying. So we don't tie it to only 5 people get to do it. I mean, I'm trying to figure out what's the best, I mean, I think it's cleaner for us as a small township to just say, well, yeah, commercial, but it's all special use, meaning you have to fit this other criteria that we're going to look at. But then it goes to the state level and they will determine the other part of it, I guess. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
So
Okay.
just because you give your approval, they can't open up their business. If they don't then meet the state requirements for their step 2, or if they, let's say, don't meet your requirements for certificate of occupancy, they're not going to be able to open up.
Well, see, what I didn't understand, and I don't want to monopolize this too much, but it's just that if I got this right, in Traverse City, they got in trouble. Because I think they were getting so grandiose on how you had to have your business look it made. Like, they wanted a design almost, I think, within the business of being able to sell it, you had to do this and this, this, and it's like, then it became like more than just selling marijuana. It was just, I mean, I could be wrong on that, but the points that they were trying to make, if you want this license, or if you want this special idea that you can have run a commercial use in our town, well, here's some of the other things we're going to add on to you. And if you can't meet it, we'll go to the next person. That just seems a little bit unfair.
So a couple things. So one, here's the how Traverse City broke down, because Traverse City had a few things. When they first started off their process, they allowed multiple applicants to apply from the same physical address. That was a problem.
Okay.
They never should have done that. They did correct that going forward. Two, when they got ready to move to the adult use recreational side, they did two things. So one, they had a different license count in terms of the number of licenses that they would allow for certain types on the recreational versus the medical. Now, that was sued on, and Judge Power in the 13th Circuit Court ruled in favor of the city, that nothing in the MMFLA or the MRTMA guarantees that the municipality has to give you the exact same number of retail licenses or grower licenses. There's nothing that requires that. Two, while he did take issue with their scoring rubric for competitive scoring, he did cite that the ability to tie bar in economic development and other related activities all are able to be legally addressed through the land use process. So for them, part of their issue was construction and citation. If you're going to cite certain things into your rubric, you need to cite where in other existing laws that allow municipalities to regulate businesses, where you're pulling that from. Or if you just do a land use process, then you make it a part of the land use application and you cite the requirements and tie bar them back to existing laws that give you the ability to add on those particular pieces, those add-ons. When that was challenged in Grand Rapids won, and Grand Rapids has specific things built in: hiring preferences, supplier procurement from local small Grand Rapids businesses. Some people had issue with that, but it was properly stated, written, and cited in the ordinance, and the city won.
Because
It's all in
that
how
was-
you write your ordinance.
because they do it for other kind of commercial uses. Is that what you're saying? That because they
Yes.
wasn't just, yeah, well, that makes sense. That's more fair. I got it. You're not specifically saying, oh, this is new, so we're gonna add all this other new stuff to you. But other people that are doing commercial don't have that.
But even if you're doing something different, you still have the statutory powers to do that based on those different provisions that I mentioned before. Nothing prevents you from using any of your other business regulatory powers to regulate these businesses, even if you do some things different with these businesses than you do with others.
What would be your opinion then, as far as, do you think it should be more free, or should it be more specific to only so many?
So I would say if your goal is to kind of create a capitalistic environment, but also minimize the impact of concern with a scoring rubric, then to use the land use process with zoning separation between licensees and between sensitive use facilities. And then when you run out of land, We just run out of land. And then everybody else gets on the waiting list.
Okay, that's kind of what we've been feeling out, that that's the easiest way for us to do it, but.
So like, for example, what with this, is this at all like a liquor license? Say I want to open a bar and I can buy the building and I'm all ready to go, but I don't have a liquor license. So that's, and
Exactly. It's
there's only so
exactly-
many of those available, isn't there, in the area? Am I understanding that correctly?
Similar premise, different though, in terms of the state doesn't have a cap on how many licenses. The cap is controlled at the local level. So you can do, in Grand Rapids, I'll go back to them as a great example. Grand Rapids is uncapped locally, but limited by zoning. Once Grand Rapids ran out of land, there's no more land for anybody to apply unless they change their zoning requirements.
Because I look at Bay City and it just seems like the mecca of marijuana.
Bay City got happy.
Yeah.
They got very happy with their process.
So,
No too happy.
but what I was thinking under those circumstances, even if it's like a mecca thing, I think the best will rise and the others follow, because that's competition, and then you're allowing for the competition. And I mean, that's just my thinking. I'm not saying I'm right on that, but so, okay, well, that's interesting.
But you know, you also want people that are willing to comply. You don't want folks that sit on a local approval for multiple years and not doing anything with the facility. And that's happened in some municipalities. You don't want people opening up because you have limited structure as to how they can open up, and basically running shops that give you the impression that you're looking at a Cheech and Chong movie. That's what you have in River Rouge. This industry is new. So in all honesty, it's going to have some requirements.
So
That's
you can
okay.
put beautification type requirements on buildings,
Yes.
so that's the point.
Well, just, I think we can do that on any building too.
You can,
Exactly.
but this process to me is a little bit different in that it's a very costly thing. I don't see the average person going into this money wise.
Well, no, it's definitely costly, but just like any other business that you regulate as a township, they have to have capital to invest, and they have to meet your requirements for being able to be open, including your building design and standards, your enforcement codes, your engineering codes, and the like. This industry, all of that stuff does not stay outside of how you regulate a marijuana business. All of that is the same in regulating a marijuana business as you would a doctor's office, a pharmacy, a liquor store, a smoke shop, a restaurant. Everybody has to meet requirements. This industry is no different, and you don't lose that power just because of this industry.
And so you're saying if we approve a license to company X and the city of Alpena approves a license to the same company, we should have it, we both should have in our ordinance, they have to be open in a year or
A time frame.
a time frame, correct? You have to have a time frame in there, because if I'm company X, well, I'll just open one of those and I'll sit on another one.
Yes, so I'll give you a good example. So when Muskegon Heights hired us, in their original medical ordinance that they had operating for over 2 years, they had people that had been approved in the first year and were going on year 2.5 and hadn't even applied for their state step 2 application. They were just basically sitting on and reselling the property to other groups that were then reselling the property. That's of no value to the community. So in our rewrite of both the medical and the recreational, we cited that you had to have proof of application for your state step 2, proof that you applied for your local, your city permits for building out your facility and your certificate of occupancy, and then final state license approval within specific dates certain. So specific time periods after you got your local permit approval, your local license approval. And that's the new way that it has to be. And you have other communities that have done that. We actually picked that idea up from Cadillac. Cadillac has that in their ordinance, and a few other communities. Because you just don't want somebody sitting on your land and doing nothing. You want action, and you can require them to prove action, or you can revoke their license. You have legislative prerogative as a municipal corporation under state law to make those sorts of decisions. You don't lose your legislative prerogative just because somebody's applying for a marijuana business license.
Well, that could be specific to the special use permit. That very thing you're talking about. As an addition to, you have to do all these things, and if you don't, it's revoked from the special use permit, and then that goes on. Okay. That makes sense.
Anybody else have any? Denise, you good?
Yep. Just one thing, just to keep in mind, City of Alpena, like exactly what Eric is talking about. City of Alpena originally had the scoring rubric, and that does become problematic if you don't have, like you said, Eric, the right things cited. And then, as you all know, they switched over to unlimited. They uncapped that, so they're letting zoning govern, who gets the zoning approval. And if you've looked, and I don't know if you have, but if you've looked at their zoning map that they have on the city website, they've blacked out all the areas that fall within those buffer zones. So it really does limit it in terms of where these things can operate. So they are letting, instead of letting, they're not having a competitive process. It is just based on land use. So I think it's simpler.
I agree with that method too. I like your capitalistic look at it.
Well, I don't know another term for it. So.
It's not a bad
I think
term.
it's fairness. It's like, I think it's very difficult to have 5 people and then we get the, well, not you. I mean, I don't like that. I'd rather it be clean.
Okay, we've got pretty close to our time, so, okay, thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you all. And if you ever have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.
We will, thank
Very
you.
good
Thanks,
information.
Eric.
Thank you. Thank you all.
That's great.
Okay, we've got a couple minutes.
If I leave, this isn't go, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, don't leave just yet. I gotta take away your host.
Oh, yes, please do. Please do. Okay.
Yes.
If you haven't
You're
signed
good to
in,
go now.
Okay.
But we do have a case coming up, but we do have, after the finality of the case on the docket for this evening's agenda, the workshop coming back on. There are also some other individuals that are online. I believe we have a Ryan Fitzsimmons that kind of also ties into this conversation of a workshop. So if there's other parts of it, and Ryan, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now. I'm unmuted. Yes.
Okay. And if you could just give a quick, are you going to be available after this case to discuss any of your specialties?
Yeah. We'll hang around for sure. That's the
Okay,
plan.
very good, thank you.
We
We'll
appreciate that.
go through our case and then we'll let you
Reconvene.
Take us home.
take us home, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Okay, well, it's just about 7 o'clock, so we were called to order, we did the pledge, we did the roll call. Okay, now we're gonna adopt the agenda.
and also sign in.
Oh, sign in,
If you
yes.
haven't signed in.
please sign in if you're,
Did you sign?
just
in?
got here. Yeah.
I don't think they signed it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you might as well, you'll have a signed applicant copy as well.
Yeah, so you're right, adoption of the agenda. And then the next is approval of minutes after the public participation. Good evening, Mr. Curry.
I'll leave it to you.
Are those extra agendas up there?
I believe
Yes,
so.
yes.
Is this what you want?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay,
So it's-
do we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Make a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
I-
Aye, opposed. Okay, public meeting participation rules. Number one, please wait for a chair to acknowledge you before you speak. Two, begin by stating your name and address. Three, give us your comments, opinions, or questions on issues being discussed. Or to ensure that everybody has time to speak and that we can address other items on the agenda, we may limit the individual speaking time to 5 minutes. If time permits, we may allow you one additional time period to provide new information. 5, be respectful of planning commission applicant and your neighbors. And again, thank you for attending. Tom Hilberg, Chairman. Okay. Do we have any public comment? Probably not. If it's in regard to the case, we'll probably do it as part of the case. But do we have anything just in general? Anybody want to?
You got approval of minutes first.
Oh, approve. Oh, I'm
October
sorry.
26th.
Approval of October 26,
So moved.
2020 meeting. Michelle and Chuck. All in favor?
I-
Aye. Okay. And I assume nobody's here for public comment. Case, do we want to bring, accept the correspondence or include that part of the case?
It just says here under correspondence, it has Rick's report. a
And then
letter
there's
from
a
Jane
letter
Miller,
too. Yeah.
And then the motion afterwards, if to accept probably Rick Dool's report and the letters, so it goes into the.
Okay.
minutes, you know.
Okay, so it's a public hearing on case P -06 -21. William Anderson requests a special approval use for expansion / enlargement of a garage. Property is located at 2927 or 8927 West Long Lake Road, parcel number 013-016-000-011-01 in a waterfront residential zone. Okay, do we have a motion to open the public hearing on this?
I don't have that on here, but,
I just
guess
have
you
it
have
on
to do
my
that?
cheat list here. Yeah.
okay, so
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Larry and
I'll second
Matt,
it.
motion to
open public hearing. All in favor?
I-
Aye. Okay, I assume you are the applicant. Okay, you want to go first, or do you have anything?
First, what do you want to know? I should probably come up here because I can't hear.
Okay,
And if you want to use that mic, then,
you can use that mic right there.
then we can hear you.
All right,
Larry.
yeah,
I worked at Stoneport for 35 years. I can't hear with the darn.
okay.
So anyway, what would you like to know?
Well, I have a question up front.
Go, yes, yes.
I see there's a portion of the extension or the addition, if you will, that's roofed but not walled.
I can't hear you.
It's as loud as I can go. On the area that's, yeah, I thought we were on, but anyway, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, for the area that's roofed but not walled, I assume that's what this drawing shows, is to take the place of a storage building that you
Yeah,
had.
there was a storage building and actually the township had it as 10 by 14, but it's actually 12 by 14. It's a metal storage building that had concrete around the outside edge, and through the years, the ground had been built up, you know.
Till it's gone. Yeah.
Well, no, it was actually in pretty good shape, but I wanted to make it look nicer.
Okay, so what this is, we're looking at the existing garage.
There's an existing garage there, and since the original storage building was too close to the lake,
Okay,
the only way I could do it without a variance is connect it to the garage, and it's
Oh.
actually going to be a storage building, but it's going to be connected to the garage. It'll be legal distance from the lake.
well, that's where my confusion was, is that you were taking an existing building, moving it up, attaching up.
It's going to be a new building. It's going to be an addition to the garage to take the place of the building that I took down.
With like an extension on the roof or like a lean-to type?
No,
No,
it's going
Okay.
to be an extension of the roof line, but as I talked to Nathan, I want to raise the roof line up 1 foot so it's easy to flash it, because the roof on the garage is only about 10 years old. There's no way to match the shingles exactly. I don't want it to be an eyesore in the neighborhood.
And I'm sure these are dumb questions, but I need to get on same page with you. Now, the thing of it is that the storage building between the back of the garage and the lake is still there.
No,
That was
No,
tore down.
no, it's gone.
no,
Yes.
I took it down.
Hey, that's, okay, go ahead.
I actually, I was going to,
But it's gone.
it's gone.
That's all I'm
It's
concerned
missing.
about.
It's gone.
So it's gone. Now, my concern is to get to that point, this, what we're looking at on the drawing here that you gave us, this area here is going to be constructionally attached to the garage.
Yes, it is.
Now this area here that's roofed over
Yep,
is non-walled. It's
non-walled,
open. It's open,
non-walled.
non-walled. What are you gonna do with that? Is it gonna be
That's the-
storage?
No, that's where my grill and stuff like that's. going to
That's
be
all I
underneath.
wanna know.
Yep,
Is there
it's-
gonna be storage for the questions we have to answer?
No, it's,
What does this do to the neighborhood? I want a bunch of storage. there that's
it's
not-
going to be
Okay,
a
I'm,
grill area, maybe a picnic table right there,
okay,
just under. a
I
roof.
got you. I'm 100%.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a nice porch.
But the storage is the big question, because we've got the questions that we put in the neighborhood. So that's what I was trying to determine. That's all I have.
There's-
Yeah.
Are you there? Yeah, okay. Kevin, you have anything to,
No, Mr. Anderson, no more than going over with us.
okay,
Follow guidelines you guys set for.
So we just close the public hearing.
and then we'll bring the
Rick Dool's fine.
Earth duels and the letter.
But before you do that, Tom, we have to make a motion
Yes,
to file all correspondence. Receive and file. So
okay.
somebody has to make a motion to file all correspondence, which was Rick Dool's report in the letter.
And
from
the letter,
Jim.
okay.
So,
Okay, does somebody want to make the motion to
I'll make the
Matt,
motion.
to, and Larry?
Okay, now we're good to.
Okay, all in favor? Aye, opposed, okay.
And Chair Hilberg, if I could address the.
Yes, you can.
The public hearings closed. Mr. Anderson has gone through all the appropriate steps. the beginning and the reality is that he had a historic structure there that he removed and then started to rebuild a new one upon inspection with Kevin Pauly and myself. Found some issues. Mr. Anderson was very forthcoming, very appreciative of the steps, unfortunately, that both sides had made. The reality came down to two potentials. One being a ZBA request for a very large variance in terms of a large one in terms of waterfront residential. The second opportunity was to actually remove the standalone accessory dwelling and tie it into and expand the existing garage, which then met all setbacks. He has to come before this commission solely for the only reason is that his rear yard, the roadside setback, will never be conforming because the replacement of the road when they redid that, it disallows a 25-foot setback that are zoning. So he's here before you for special use to expand the garage that's existing. And that alleviates the spacing issues between the water and existing structures. So that was my.
Okay, because so we're 26, waterfront residential is 25 foot to high water, and you're going to be 26.2. So we're satisfying that, correct? Yes.
That's correct.
And the front, and like Nathan said, the front we can't satisfy because of the removal of the road. And we're good on the offsets on the side, Kevin? Yes. Okay, I guess, should we, anybody else have anything on the, okay, we'll close, we have a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Michelle and
Also,
Larry, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
question.
yes,
Was there was a letter that was sent? Was there?
yes,
was
and
that
we're gonna,
letter-
I don't know if I should do that during or. There is a letter from Julie Miller. And it's in your package there, and she's asking that we grant this. And then we have the special use permit review from Rick Dool.
Well, I don't know. It's probably, it looks like you should go through this
Yes,
and we'll check it off as it,
yes,
right?
yes.
How you're
And then we'll make a motion to either accept or
Accept
deny.
this report,
Yes.
right,
Oh,
with the, which.
well, we're gonna read, yeah, we already accepted the report into,
We accepted the
file, yeah.
report into it, but this is about talking about it as to whether we agree with these, not agree, or it's not applicable. So I don't know if that's just. See, it
And-
says that it says on my cheat sheet, Chairman Hilberg will read section 3.12 D 1E and section 602 of Rick Dool's findings of fact report. As the commission
Yes.
reviewed each standard, Chairman Hilberg noted.
and under section D, it's non-conforming use of land, and 1A, B, C, and D are telling us why we shouldn't allow addition or enlarging non-conforming, and section E says we can expand, enlarge by special use land. The planning commission may issue a special land use approval, may be allowed, that which is not allowed under sections B, C, and D above, provided that it is conclusively shown that the extension or enlargement will not reduce the value of otherwise limit the lawful use of adjacent premises, will not essentially retain the character of and environment of the abutting premises and will not cause, perpetuate, or material increase any nuisance aspects of the use upon adjacent uses such as noise, glare, traffic congestion, or land overcrowding.
So you're basically saying yes to all three.
We're, we are saying yes to part E if we're gonna continue to
Okay,
move on to section 6, which is special use.
so what did you know?
I guess I noted nobody objected to section E that we are gonna. And I reviewed the area, and this is not gonna do any of these. It's not gonna detract from the character of the land at all. It's gonna improve it. Yes, yes. I think, yeah. And Kevin thinks so, so that's 2 of us anyway.
So the section 3.12 D1E. Is what? The chairman noted that the section 3.12 D1E was not, I mean, everybody,
Agreed
Okay.
that we would consider granting this if it met the other. And we've already accepted the, okay, so then we'll go through the finding of facts, location, we know that parcel, waterfront residential, it gives the dimensions. Should I read line and verse then? Applicant wants to enlarge the size of residential accessory structure from 24 by 24 by 224 by 36. Size of proposed structure will be 864 square feet. The enlargement will not encroach further into the rear or side yard setbacks. The enlargement will extend 12 feet towards the waterfront and will be 26.2 feet from the high water mark, according to the certificate of survey provided by the applicant. The size of residential structure is 34 feet by 44.7. Size of the residence is 1,520 square feet. Proposed enlargement of the accessory structure will not exceed 200% of the size of the primary residence, excuse me. Okay. Expansion enlargement by issuance of special land use approval may allow that which is allowed in sections B, C, and D above, provide that it is conclusively shown that the extension or enlargement, okay, will not reduce the value or otherwise limit the lawful use of adjacent premises. That standard has been met, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The will not essentially retain the character and environment of the abutting premises. That standard has been met, correct? Speak up if you don't let me speak for you, but will not perpetuate or materially increase the nuisance aspects of the use upon adjacent uses such as noise, traffic, glare. The proposed enlargement of necessary structure will not be a nuisance to adjacent properties. We agree that. Okay, section 6 or 602, this location, size, and nature of and intensity of operation shall not be such to disrupt the orderly and proper development of the district as a whole, or be in conflict with or discourage the principal permitted uses of adjacent or neighboring lands or buildings. The enlargement of the accessory structure will not disrupt the development or be in conflict with principal permitted uses in the neighborhood. We agree. Okay, special land use shall not be objectionable by nearby properties by reason of noise, vibration, dust, fumes, smoke, glare, flashing lights, or disposal of waste. The operation of any principal use proposed enlargement accessory will not be objectionable to nearby properties. We agree that it will not be. There won't be, this enlargement will not increase hazards or fire dangers, property or adjacent properties. We agree with that. Okay, planning commission may consider potential impact on property values nearby properties when determining the impact of the adjacent properties. We believe this would, if it does anything, it should increase the value of the adjacent properties, correct? Traffic and noise, I don't see this causing any, shall not increase traffic hazard or cause congestions on public highways, streets. I don't see that. This is, that's a no. Okay, water supply and sewage, this is not going to have any water or sewage facilities in this structure, correct?
No.
Okay. Okay, so that's no problem. Okay, the use of adequately served essential public, okay. That we don't, that's NA. We will not have, there's no public facilities there, so, okay, the use will not create excessive additional public costs to, and will not be detrimental to the economic welfare of the township. We agree, yes. Natural resources, the proposed use will not create a substantially negative impact on the natural resources of the township. Agree. Okay, the use will not impair the purpose and intent of this ordinance. The proposed enlargements of the accessory structure will not impair the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. Okay, now now we're to we've determined that the structure is not going to be a detriment to the township. Okay, so now we have a choice to approve, motion approve as is, approve with conditions, or deny.
I'll make that motion
I'll support the
to approve.
option one.
Approve as is,
Wait.
or
I make a motion to approve the special land use. For the
slow me
enlargement.
down, Anne Marie. Am
Yeah,
I going
just
too
a minute.
fast?
The second, it's a motion was made, and supported to adopt and approve Rick Dool's findings to
Okay,
the applicable zoning ordinance standards in this report. So that's a roll call.
okay.
Okay, Daring,
Yes.
Hilbert,
Yes.
LaFever,
Yes.
Foley,
Yes.
Redosi,
Yes.
Woodruff.
Yes.
Okay, now we're to Norm's motion.
Yeah, I was gonna make that motion that we approve this.
Approve it as
To
number
approve.
one,
As option one,
option one.
I support.
Motion to approve special land use for enlargement of accessory structure located at 8927 West Long Lake Road, Alpena, Michigan, 49707 on parcel 013-016-000001101, based on the findings of fact continued in report 06/2021. Motion made by Foley, supported by LaFever. Now we need the roll call.
Okay, Daring,
Yes.
Hilbert,
Yes.
LaFever,
Yes.
Foley,
Yes.
Redosi,
Yes.
Rich, yes, Woodruff.
Yes.
Okay. You're good, Mr. Anderson. You're all,
Good to go.
Yeah, nice job.
Okay, I missed this. Who made this?
I'm out of here then.
no, wait, hang on one second.
Rick Dool's
Hang on one second. She didn't give me my little,
You don't understand?
I don't understand.
And
That's all right.
he did that. He did that. I didn't hear who made I heard it, but I didn't write it down. Rick Dool's
Foley
finding,
made the motion.
no, not for the last one, but for the finding to adopt Rick
finding.
Dool's finds. Applicable zoning ordinance standards in his report. I thought it was LaFever and Foley, but,
I made it and then we'll come back.
so
with
you
it.
did both of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. thought. I didn't want to write it down unless it was me. Okay.
So you can get us.
See, this,
If you have a
we got rid of
problem,
that
you can
part.
get Polly and myself.
Okay.
Right, there's no-
I
So I
have a
just put
question
to
for you.
grant.
What's your last name?
Just to grant
Oh,
that. yeah.
P-O-L-I.
Matt?
Yes, to grant it.
That's my son.
without
That's your son?
condition.
Yes,
Okay.
one of them.
It'd be no-
You know, your face just reminds me of somebody that I knew.
There's only one of them. Well, if you think of it, you know how to get hold of me.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking about it, you know, like. Used to be a Ed Steinke. Kind of looked like it, and it's, I was thinking of a Meshach that looked like you, but it's just, your face rings a bell. I don't know where I've seen you before. but I've seen you.
Well, I've been around a couple.
Let's
places.
hope, let's hope it was a legal
Yeah,
situation.
yeah. Sometimes it gets a little questionable. But I can blame it on my glasses. So.
It's when you haven't seen somebody for a long time, they walk up and say, you remember when? And all of a
You know,
sudden,
you go through this, you know, I mean, you see somebody and you know them, or you see somebody that you see and.
Okay.
Reminds you of somebody that.
Sign right there, and you take that one with you. Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Good
So
luck
now I
in
can
your
get a
project.
permit,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and we will close this part of the meeting. We have a motion to close.
I'll make a motion.
Larry,
I'll support it.
Michelle, all in favor? Aye. Okay, well, now we'll go back to the public hearing. Workshop, excuse me, workshop.
So Denise, are you on?
I'm still here.
All right.
Mr. Fitzsimmons, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I will-
So I don't know if you guys want me to proceed forward, but essentially my name's Ryan Fitzsimmons. My business partners and I own and operate a handful of state licensed medical and recreational facilities. I've got one of my partners on with me tonight that I'll introduce you to in a little bit. But I thought that I'd offer a unique perspective. We've got quite a good and solid and successful track record working with municipalities to get these businesses off and going. And we find that it's co-beneficial, especially early on, to get dialogue on what we're trying to do with a project as a municipality, and the township is developing its ordinance and making sure it's suiting local people and potential business owners. Essentially, the project we'd like to work with Brock Johnson, and we've identified some other individuals in the community, in particular, a couple of caregiver growers through the Medical Marijuana Act that haven't been able to find a home in a state licensed cultivation facility. And we think these guys are very talented. And while the state provided as caregivers, they provided one of our early dispensaries product until the state had limited their ability to do so October 1st of last year. And so maybe this is the time to introduce Josh. Josh has helped us with the process and our relationships with municipality. He's a partner. He's also our cannabis attorney. And through this process, we feel strongly is a reason why we were the first medical and recreational dispensary in Northern Michigan and the first recreational dispensary in Kent County. And so Josh could say a little bit to you as far as that goes, and we'd love to open ourselves up to questions and tell you a little bit more about the project that we're hoping can maybe come to light, months down the line.
Where are your existing facilities?
So Roger City Township, we're in Lowell, and we're in Manistee, and we're opening in Cedar Springs. Those are the dispensaries. We also have cultivation facilities and processors from Manistee, Lansing, Roger City, and hoping to open additional facilities, whether they be cultivation processors or dispensaries over the next 12 months. We've got a handful of projects in the works.
Yeah, and my name was Josh Covert. Hello, everybody. I work with the Michigan Cannabis Lawyers, and as Ryan mentioned, I'm also a partner in this project. I've represented cannabis businesses throughout the state of Michigan. I originally started working with legislation involving cannabis in 2015 when I was a board member of MI Legalize, which was the group that worked towards putting the adult use on the ballot in 2016, and then a part of the committee that accomplished it in 2018. So I've been working with, businesses and municipalities as far as licensing goes. And so that's kind of where I come in. I really appreciated the earlier session with Banks and Company and what they offered and put forward. I also, I kind of hear the discussion about the competitive process, the scoring of applicants, and maybe shying away from that for an uncapped land use style. And that's what I've been, speaking to city councils about for some time, is that's a simpler approach that really takes away a lot of the potential litigation and makes it better for both the businesses and the municipalities. And just like Alpena City did, we've seen the same thing in Gaylord, where Gaylord started off with the scored rubric process, but then shifted over before the ordinance was finalized to do an uncapped special land use permit style. And I think that's definitely the best approach from what I've seen, working with cities and businesses, that kind of works for everybody. Nobody wants things to get caught up in litigation. Both the winners and losers, let's say, on potential, scoring, get caught up in court. And it can take a year or longer for things to get settled out. And I don't think anybody wants that. So we've seen much like Banks and Company said, that when you look at restricting the number expressly and then combining a competitive process, really just opens up a can of worms. So that's just one thing I kind of wanted to add. But if anybody has any questions, Ryan and I both would be more than happy to answer those, as well as discuss more particulars about this potential project.
Any questions for either of the gentlemen online? Otherwise, we can just let Denise kind of take, obviously, we've listened to one presentation from Mr. Foster. We have two professional individuals currently in the industry. We also have a local asset here that's got his foot in the door in the community as well through this process. So I think maybe it'd just be best served to give it back to Denise at this point and let her do what she does.
Well, I don't have a presentation, but that's okay. So I just, facilitate the talking, right? So I'm just curious, because we brought up the whole idea of unlimited licenses versus having some competitive process. I'm just curious as to how the planning commission members are feeling about that, if you've developed any opinions yet.
I guess be early, I mean,
No, I don't have.
knowing what I know right now, I guess I'm kind of, I don't, that scoring system is like, is very, very difficult to be arbitrary. I mean, it's just, unless people were behind, you didn't know their names and they were behind a curtain, it's hard to, say, on a 1 to 10 basis, it's hard to, and you only know what you're getting. I guess they have to give you some kind of a resume, I assume, but then you know what you know, and if they have a better presentation, that doesn't mean necessarily that they're a better company to go with. So I'm kind of feeling that will, my opinion is if we do this, we should just let them zone themselves out of licenses.
Can
Go ahead, yes.
Since August or maybe June, when I jumped on this commission and we've had that many workshops on this topic, every conversation is ended with, what does this put us with a liability? So by doing unlimited, it eliminates another one of those liabilities that we seem to be very concerned about on the zoning commission. And remember, we're zoning. We're not approving their licenses. That's for the state. This is for zoning the building or the whatever it is that is approved for. So if we go unlimited, I think that that's great. It promotes commerce. It lessens the backlog and again, the liability. So I think we all were very privy to see what happened with the city and when they put limits on it. So why open us up to more meetings?
And I'm with the idea, it's a legally, it's legal, so, and however you want to zone that, that's who gets to do it. I mean, I don't think we don't limit, like I said, churches, all these things that are legal. We don't limit it if it's zoned properly.
Is there anyone on the commission that's against the unlimited?
No, I
Okay. Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, so that's I'm not against it.
I'm not against it.
Great.
So I guess the commission.
They meet all the laws and all the requirements.
As
Yeah.
long as it's
It's another business.
I guess I'm asking you, Denise, now under special use, which we already have in our ordinance, would there be a side for, my biggest thing is what I find very difficult to do is tell somebody, well, if you get that building, and let's say it's an old commercial building, we don't want it to be janky. I mean, how do you, how do you tell somebody, okay, you can do that, but you've got to beautify that building?
Well, so the city actually does have something like that that they have in their standards, in their version of your Article 7, the supplemental standards, committing to physical improvements of the building and, eliminating blight on the property. If there's blight to be eliminated, I mean, there might not be, it might be a perfectly beautiful piece of property and building from the beginning, but they have that stuff being submitted to planning commission. Originally, it was part of the scoring rubric was, if you present a good plan for eliminating blight on property, for improving a building, then you get extra points. But what they did now is because they don't have that rubric, they just put that in, hey, the planning commission wants to see your plan for improving the building. Like I said, there may not be a plan because the building may not need any sort of improvement. So they haven't gone, what?
Well, what if it does? I mean, because beauty is in the eye of the beholder. There's a couple times I had playfully asked, hey, it'd be great if you put some landscaping in because it's kind of ugly by the street. And then you're looked at like, well, that's more money, so no.
Well, your landscaping section, comes into play, but that's for all businesses. So, I mean, you're going to look at it with those same standards as you would for any type of business that comes in, is that, yep, we have a landscaping section that you have to comply with. So.
But do we? I mean, I want you to look at that because that's where I think we fall apart a little bit. Just my personal, I mean, there were times when we could have had trees put in at Meyer and things like that. We didn't do that. Oh,
well, I mean, you do, I'm
did
looking
do
at your
that.
landscaping section right now. I mean, you do have standards. I'm not saying they're not incredibly strict. And I remember, I think that was purposeful to allow some flexibility, but I
Yeah,
mean, it
that's the
does.
issue, you know, where you get
Yep.
into flexibility, but then you get into, they're taking on an old building, it's ugly, and it's gonna be and you're kind of wanting it to look like an office space kind of place. I don't know. Do you
But I
know
mean,
what Yeah,
it does say, for example, that, all developed portions of a site that's not occupied by buildings or the parking lot shall be planted with grass, ground cover, shrubs, suitable plant material. It gives a specification of a mix of evergreen and deciduous trees. I mean, it does have some standards in there that need to be followed. So I mean, that's something as a proposal comes in, that we're gonna have to look at and say, all right, is it following this landscape? But that's no different than, it should be being implemented in all these other things that are getting
well,
built.
that's my point, because when you start doing special use and you
Yep.
start pointing on to the medical marijuana buildings have to look different than others that we've made, you can't do that, right? You can't,
No, but that's already in our language. Is that correct?
it's in the language,
Yeah.
but we are not, in my opinion, enforcing that very well. Or not, I shouldn't say enforcement, that's wrong. It's
Requirement.
required,
Carrying it.
requirement, yes.
Chair Hilbert,
Yeah.
may I
Go ahead, yes.
So to your point, Anne Marie, for a perfect representation of stipulations put on properties, you can go to the rezone of the old Kmart building. Even though they're slowly somewhat
Yes.
getting to the point where,
Yeah.
but we actually have in the past 2 years, at least 1 year of an excuse. But that being said, that was part of those stipulations, was changing the fascia of the building. They started that process. Next year, by spring, they're supposed to submit a landscape design to meet that standard. So it hasn't really come up very many times in our recent history. But this commission has put stipulations forward that actually use our current zoning to strengthen the end result.
Yeah, but actually, if I remember correctly, it was them telling us what they were going to do. And we just said, okay, let's make sure they do it. And Norm reminded them several times, hey, when you gonna paint the building? Because you said you were gonna do it.
Oh, and I've been staying on that. Like I said, it isn't complete, but those conversations actually were part of, it wasn't what they were telling you. They were telling this commission what had already been discussed several times with Chair Hilbert, myself, and at that point in time, our building official, to
Okay.
make sure that that ball started rolling in the proper direction. By the time it got here, there was at least a direction.
Okay,
We approved what they wanted to do.
I know, but there are things we could tell them to do. That's what I'm
But-
trying to say. It's not them telling us what to do. It's us telling them what to do.
But it's what they had there. We thought that was fine.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Can I ask a question?
Good, yes, yes.
Quick
absolutely.
question. Who is the accountability police on all this? Who,
Nathan.
what, I mean, okay, okay, no, I'm just wondering that
Norm's
because,
my good deputy. So Norm's
no,
my
that's
deputy.
great, that's great, because
Norm's is
if we're
supposed
gonna
to-
hold this standard to someone who's opening a medical marijuana facility,
Yeah.
then this standard's gotta be held to every single person who falls under an ordinance. But my point to this is Nathan Skibby can't do everything,
No,
right? So does that become a role of us as the commission to also kind of keep an eye on that stuff
And
and
remind me, Mr. Skibby.
and just remind them?
Yeah.
Okay. Take a drive by so-and-so's place.
Michelle, we can make recommendations. We
Great.
can enforce laws.
Great, so, great, no, I'm happy to do that, I just think that I needed the clarity as to who the accountability police is,
And
because,
to me, many eyes
Or some
are,
others.
yeah,
many hands make. light work.
absolutely, 100%, but if this is all now just coming to light because we're reviewing the ordinance for marijuana, I don't want the folks on the line or here in person thinking that we're gonna hold them to a different standard than we hold anybody
no,
else.
I agree.
We'll
I think
approve the
that's what
plan if
Anne
it
Marie
meets the
has been saying.
standard.
That's my point.
And then if we can put in, just like with any other ordinance, and Denise, it could be for anything, so please tell me, I haven't memorized ordinances yet.
Really?
But does every new building, whatever, do they have this set of criteria that we seem to be kind of hung up on right now as to, what's your progress report on the, the look of the building, the look of the property?
see, it's specific in the ordinance, there's a section on it, but then when you do special use, I
Mhm.
think you can do additional, especially when it comes to buffering or anything like that, because
But are we
Because-
doing that for every business
no,
that
because
does
not
this,
every
or are
business
we?
is a
not special
These are
use.
gonna be special use, every
Right.
single one of them, which means they're gonna be under a different microscope. So I don't know if you can add, that's what I'm asking, can you add over and above what already is in the special use in the districts? I mean, in the ordinance to the special use within these different.
So you already do that in Article 7. If you look at Article 7, you have, you've got, 42 or 43 separate uses that you have specific regulations for that just apply to that use. Now, they're not all special uses. Some of them are permitted, but you have specific things like the commercial event facilities. Remember that big section where we talk about, wedding barns and that type of stuff? So you have very specific standards that go with those specific uses.
Okay.
Some of these are a lot more rigorous than what, for example, like the city of Alpena has for their marijuana facilities. Theirs is very short, and usually in the zoning ordinances, it's pretty short. I mean, at least the ones that I've been looking at, they're not as rigorous as like what you guys just adopted for commercial event facilities or wind energy or cell towers and that kind of stuff. So you do have those specific things. So you have, you have your standards that apply to everything, like your landscaping standards, your lighting standards, your sign standards. That applies to everything, whether it's special use or not. It applies to all of your non-residential uses in the community that come in. And then you have Article 7, which is the specific uses. And then you also have the ability to enact conditions for discretionary use, for uses that have discretionary decisions. Special use is a discretionary decision, right? Because those standards in your special use chapter, which you just went through, they're very, they're discretionary. It's in the opinion of the commission, is it meeting these standards? Okay, it's not, oh yes, they have the right setbacks. Those are non-discretionary, but will it affect the neighborhood, right? That's discretionary because that's all your opinion as a group. So you have the ability to put conditions on. So let's say there's something that's going to go in that the standards that we have, the specific standards we have listed in the ordinance maybe aren't quite going to cut it. So as long as you can tie it back, public health, safety, and welfare, you can add additional conditions on based on your condition section, which is in Article 9. So there's three different things I'm talking about: the standards that apply to everything, the specific standards to apply to specific uses, and then conditions. So, you have
You're
options.
pretty covered then.
You're covered.
The first guy that talked, I thought it was interesting, and I wondered if you had written this into the ordinances that you're doing, is all that other provisions that the state offers,
Yep.
like all of that as a way of protecting yourself. I don't even know half of it.
Yeah, that's
That in-
with the city of Alpena revision, because they're looking at, the adult use side of things right now. So, you're talking about the length of now, again, set the zoning part aside. This is the licensing side of it. Theirs is about 20 pages. It's pretty specific. And those things that he was referencing earlier tonight, all of those, those sort of background things. So he provided a lot of commentary on the city of Alpena's draft that they're looking at tomorrow night. So that's all in there as like notes on the side. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure, the city wouldn't mind if you looked at theirs to see what that looks like. But you can find that in other ordinances too. It's not just theirs. I mean, theirs isn't adopted yet, but you can find that, you can find that stuff in other ordinances. This is very, very, very good. So, but again, we're kind of talking about two different things: the licensing side of it and then the zoning side of it. The zoning side of it is a lot, more simple. I don't know how much you want to get into specific standards. I know it's getting late. You guys have been there almost a couple hours. We have experts on the line right now. So, I mean, I guess we could, I don't know how you want to go forward. Do you want to really look at zoning stuff, or do we want to ask questions while we have people here that are in the industry? What would make more sense? And then talk about our specific zoning language that we want to adopt at the next meeting. I guess you guys tell me.
Well, I'm ready for a boilerplate ordinance personally,
The zoning or the licensing?
zoning.
Zoning.
'Cause
Okay.
it has to go to the board for approval.
Yeah,
Our
well, you,
our job is just to write it. It's not up to us to approve it.
right,
I
so,
feel that that's like our job right now is to come up with some kind of a usable zoning ordinance to give to our trustees.
so that.
It's
so-
their job to
Yep.
pass it or deny it.
You have that, so that's what we had started working on for the last couple of meetings with
Right.
that 9-page thing, and you all went through it at the last meeting, and that's the one I couldn't be at, and you put a bunch of S's in the table for special uses next to these different types of facilities. And so I have that updated, and there, I think you expanded it quite a bit from what I had initially put in terms of those districts. So, I mean, I don't know that we necessarily have to talk about where, although I guess I do have a question. I'd like to, because this is something that I'm not sure of for our gentleman on the line. Marijuana micro business. I mean, I know what the definition is, but I've not, what does that look like in real life? Is that a actual retail store? Is it, can you describe to me what that looks like?
Yeah, I can take that. I would say most all micro businesses would have a retail establishment. It's not necessarily required because although they have to sell their products retail, there would be a potential option that they could sell them at licensed marijuana temporary events. But I would expect most micro businesses would have the retail as part of it. So we would really be looking at a stacked facility that would be cultivation, processing, and then retail sales. Now the state has also proposed a new classification of license, a Class A micro business, and it's currently going through the administrative rule amendment process. And it would create the Class A micro business, which would increase the cultivation to 300 plants. It would take away the processing, which leaves one less thing to kind of have to find a fit for in the building. And then it also allows the retail.
Okay. Because that was at the last meeting, you all expanded the list of where marijuana micro businesses could be. Is that correct?
I wouldn't have been at that meeting. So.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Whatever Nathan wrote, that we agreed to, basically what you,
that was
yes, we
2
did.
meetings ago, or?
Oh,
2
well,
meetings
that one I
ago,
do
that was
remember
Denise,
that.
yeah.
Okay.
And then also, I have a question on the timeframes. Would the planning commission be would we set up, would that be part of our, okay, we have said you can put a retail facility here. Okay, and then would we set up, okay, in 6 months, you have to have license in hand, or a year you have to have license in hand, because we don't want them to tie up property and not. Can you talk about that? What are reasonable expectations of us to, if we give somebody, all we can do is say, okay, you can put that business here. Well, then, you have to go through and satisfy all the state requirements, but you have to do that in a reasonable time. So what is a reasonable time? If you know what I mean.
Like for each one, for each licensee.
For each license, yeah.
Because, I mean, can you attach that to the special use as a condition that you can get this, but then you have to meet the licensing requirements within a certain period of time under each licensee, like give it a time frame?
I think Ryan raised his hand.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on this. I think setting an expectation of time makes a lot of sense. I can kind of give you a general timeline of how long things have taken for us to open up. The fastest amount of time that we've been able to open a state licensed dispensary has been 6 months, and that it's somewhat extraordinary, I think, in most circumstances, since an ordinance passes to doing that. Through COVID, you've seen, not only us as operators, but other operators, those timelines, because of a increased labor costs or just availability of, decent contractors, it can take a year to a year and a half on a dispensary. I think right now that limited to a year, but having, something in there where there's open dialogue and you can see progress being made. So you're avoiding those individuals that are just looking to lock up property and keep people out. So a timeline makes sense, but I think an open dialogue on what that looks like and reasonable extensions. The city of Manistee, for instance, it extended for all licenses at least 6 months in order to get open through some COVID delays and you'll find that processors and cultivators take a bit more time because of the details there in order to set up in comparison to a dispensary. So if that helps.
Yes, yeah, because I mean, like, we don't want you tying up property because you're gonna open another one up in the city. And so if you got this tied up in the township, then we're, that's what we're just trying to avoid, what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense to us. And for us, we've identified a property kind of early on that will make sense for our needs. And then you can kind of see that, our project is specific to that site, for instance. So I think there's probably some common sense ways to determine that someone's doing that rather than just holding up multiple properties through purchase agreements and aren't making steps forward into opening or getting those property licensed.
So logistically, in order for you to apply for a state license, you already have to have location, correct?
Yes, yeah, for it, exactly. And I can let Josh speak to this too, but yeah, you've essentially kind of pre-qualified and gotten a pre-qualification within the municipality and kind of identified a property in most instances, and then you're getting licensed through the municipality and then licensed through the state, and then you kind of go back after you get that state license to the municipality and ensure that indeed right before opening, all of that very long checklist is met in every way, shape, and form, from your special use permit or special land use, to the regulatory requirements of the municipality.
Are the licenses attached to the property that you're buying?
It's different municipality to municipality, and Josh has much more experience in working with many operators. But typically your special land use or special use permit is tied to the property, or it's most common. And then the marijuana side of things, as far as the municipality license and state licensing, is tied typically to the operator or that operating company.
Yeah, Ryan's correct that it's tied to the land and also to the license holder, which would be, let's say the business. And there can be only transfers with both approval from the state and the municipality if the municipality puts that into their ordinance, that in order to transfer the license, it needs to be, let's say, reapproved.
Okay, that's your special use. Okay.
I mean, we could, actually make the 9-page zoning draft was sort of a compilation of a lot of different communities that I was giving you as examples. But I'm just getting the sense that just from the discussion, that we want to make this as simple as possible. Am I right on that? Because I mean, some communities have a lot more that's required to be submitted. I'm thinking just from some of the conversation, it sounds like, you want it to be exactly what other people or other businesses that are applying for a special use have to submit. Does that sound right? Without any additional requirements in terms of submittal? I'm not talking about standards, but what do they have to submit? Is it just a site plan and whatever else we require in the special use chapter?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I would say.
Okay.
I mean, you don't want it to be bogged down at our level too much. I mean, because the state's going to get a hold of it, and
that's why I'm bringing that up, is that, they're already pre-qualified, right? So
yeah.
from the state, they've got all of those standards already met. So I'm just looking real quick at this draft. It does talk about location and that it has to be operated from the premises that gets the special use approval. Most of this language is pretty simple. It's just referencing back to your sign section. You know, you have a section on performance standards. I don't know how many times you look at that, but that the performance standards section in your ordinance, that applies to everybody, actually, not just businesses, where it's about, you know, odor control and noise and stuff. That applies to everybody in the township equally. So really, we need to just reference back to that, provide a link back to that in your interactive ordinance. You know, a lot of communities will put in about, you know, lighting, which you already have a lighting section, and, you know, having it not shine onto adjacent properties, but you already say that. So really, we're just kind of restating what's already in there. I'll make some changes to this. I'm just kind of hitting some key points right now.
But we do already say in there that if whoever's gonna come to us and wanna do this, do a facility, whatever licensor they think they wanna do, they have to be pre-qualified before they come to us, correct?
Well, that would be something that I would think most of the licensing ordinances say that you want that letter. And like when Alpena was getting their applications, they all came with that pre-qualification
Okay,
letter.
yeah, I just wanna make sure. It probably was in there, but I didn't. I wanna just,
I think that would be part of that
Yeah.
language of the proof of the pre-application submission to the state would be part of the application from this municipality. That way you know that they have one big step taken care of at the state level to engage at this level, that then turns right back to the state.
So they're pre-qualified basically, to
Yeah. That first step.
step one.
Step one's
step
done.
two, and-
okay.
Now, the separation distances, I know that Presque County has a 500-foot, I believe it's 500-foot distance. And in their latest, and I don't know if this was adopted yet, but I know that the latest draft, they were making sort of a provision in there that could be reduced if, I'm just looking at, this language is actually on page 8 and 9 of the example that I gave you, that if like the planning commission may grant a reduction in the separation distance and finding that it won't, you know, adversely affect neighboring properties, won't damage the neighborhood character, and that, and again, I don't know if they adopted this or if this is just still the draft they're looking at, but that, you know, you've got to have, if they're going to get a waiver, they've got to get some signatures of the neighboring property owners that say that they don't mind if that separation distance, because that was separation distance, I think, from residential, I believe. Yeah, actually, it was quite residential and a whole bunch of other things. So
That clause has the name for it. Like, I forget what it's called, like a special name, like,
It's just called
Like-
separation distances in here. Marijuana facilities and establishments shall not be located within 500 feet of any building used for residential, education, religious, childcare, park, or addiction treatment purposes.
The state defaulting zoning that he
Yeah,
just
that's it,
discussed,
that's
yes,
it.
that was 1,000 feet.
Yep, and
but
right.
we
That's
can
the
do
minimum.
Yeah.
We can
but
make it shorter.
make it
How do you
shorter.
feel about,
Yeah.
how do you feel about that? Do you want to keep the 1,000-foot that the state says, or do you want to reduce it to something
I
like?
don't know
what
if
Presque
I don't know if we have a piece of land that would qualify for 1,000 foot of all those.
It's gotta be reasonable, but also I
Right?
like the
Yeah.
default.
I can't
thing
think of
that,
anyone.
You know, if it's not
Well,
in
it's a
that,
couple of mine.
that we can look at it as a
We need to make
whole
it 500 feet.
and, you know, decide how it affects, if it, or it doesn't affect. You know, because there's nothing gonna be perfect every, that's why it's a special use. You're looking at all the things. Because that piece of property may fit all the boxes. So as a commission, we get to kind of work with that, you know?
I have a question again about, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go
Then I'm
ahead.
going to ask you a question.
I could shine a little light on that. The county has been great to us. We recently purchased an additional 38 acres on a grow facility that we have there. And there was a building that was 420 feet from the nearest resident, which is kind of funny because it's cannabis. But we got a letter from that neighbor. And the process we went through in the communication, we're having great success with them and a common sense approach. It seems like that number is quite arbitrary. Like we have no idea that resident is even there, and it was out of our realm of thought until someone pointed it out to us in the process, and it's worked out quite well since. If that helps.
And that's something that, I mean, that's something that the residential, the 500 feet from residential, that's something that the county put. I mean, the state is just from like schools, right? The state just says schools.
Correct. And I can let Josh hit a few other things. I know, yeah, there's differences municipality to municipality as far as churches and things go, but I think the vast majority kind of treat cannabis in the same common sense approach as having a liquor license. And so you don't see many, other than schools,
Okay.
many other limitations.
Yeah, and in fact, the 1,000 feet from a school can even be lessened if the municipality so chooses to do so. And the only state requirement is in fact that 1,000-foot requirement. And again, only if the municipality chooses not to lessen it.
So I got a question for the planning commission, and then I have another facility question, but so planning commission, do you want it listed on page 8 here where it lists, this is from Presque Isle County, where it talks about residential, education, religious, childcare, park, or addiction treatment center. Do you want all of those listed in there as part of that separation distance? Or do you want to limit it to only some of those? Do you want residential to stay, or does that make it too limiting?
See, I mean, as far as retail, do we have a spot in the whole township where we don't have residents within residential section within 500 feet? I can't think of any.
Maybe B2 south of town,
No,
maybe.
No, well, it'd be close.
no.
I
I
don't,
can confirm that's a hard no.
yeah.
And I tend to agree. I think if there's one thing just outside of this conversation that we've looked and learned over ordinance 142, which is now 145, because of our succession of amendments, is to still take the waiver language and that common sense approach. The more we can think about this proactively and have mechanisms in place that don't involve amending our master document, the better off we are moving forward. So in that instance where the hilarity is that it was 420 when they had to maintain 500 feet, learn the lessons of all these other neighboring municipalities that are fairly similar. This is Roger City. It's smaller, but in the same confines, very similar to us. So to offer that language of a waiver, if certain other parameters are met, isn't adding complexity. It's actually mitigating real labor-intensive amendments that would actually have to take place. So to put some mechanism in there to identify the unknowns.
But you have a committee here, a commission.
Oh, yeah.
that votes on it,
Mhm.
Yeah.
on that very amendment, like,
Yeah,
But instead of
as you
rewriting the
know-
amendment for every
no,
situation.
I'm saying, if you say, we have the opportunity to waiver something as a commission in your language, that's not one person making a decision.
no,
That's
I
a
know, I
commission making
wholeheartedly-
a decision.
Right.
So I
Henceforth,
think-
the
yeah,
case that you saw this evening,
right.
I saw it best fit to have 7 opinions making a sound decision rather than 1.
And so I like the waiver approach. I don't know if that's the term you could use legally, but just, I don't know what term you use.
But we still have to identify 1,000 feet or 500 feet and then the caveat of the waiver.
Well, I think Denise is suggesting, maybe we're being too specific.
I'm thinking, I'm saying 1,000 is too much, and
I think
don't
1,000
know
is
what-
too much.
Because, well, look, I mean, up there by Walmart Meyer there, now you have a church.
Yeah.
So if you went 1,000 feet, we'd be in Green Township, so
Technically.
Well,
technically. But I mean, it's,
But Denise, is that correct? Do we have to say 1,000 or 500 plus add the waiver, or do we just?
Yeah, I would put the waiver in, but I think if the fact that even 500 feet is going to put you within, within 500 feet of residential, having that word residential in there, you'd be having to do a waiver every single time. So, I mean, I guess I'm asking, should we scratch that word out and just leave the rest of those? Was there an answer there? Because it kind of cut out.
What other businesses is there distances from churches, schools, and everything besides alcohol.
Sexually oriented businesses.
Pardon?
Sex toys, sex shops.
Okay.
Pornographic,
Porno.
come on, kids.
Sorry.
Mm.
But liquor stores have a,
Yeah.
because I mean, every church has a liquor store in this town.
What?
I mean, that's the truth.
You don't have in your ordinance anything about bars or liquor stores.
Okay,
Just,
okay.
you know.
That's why I was
That's a
confused.
state rule.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because it's Alpena. You can only
Yeah,
go
you're thinking-
32 feet between a bar.
You're thinking.
Right, yeah, well, like
You
I
walk
said, every
across the
church has a
street.
bar. It's just happens to be across the street.
So you're saying not to put a distance?
Well, I'm
to
asking
these, or
you,
that's what you're,
I'm asking you guys about residential, whether to leave that word in there.
Forget it, but why would we even have it in there? If it's in.
Because in a lot of other ones, that's what, like,
that's one
that's
she,
one that is usually.
she
put
took it
back.
out of press
Then,
skills.
Yeah.
We're gonna have.
But
a lot
because
of-
our township has a lot of commercial right next to residential.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you do.
Especially the south Route 23 corridor, that's why we have that overlay.
Yeah.
That's exactly why that overlay is there. That 300-foot overlay is to deal with the residential and say, oh, we'll make you commercial now, you know, it's kind of like, yeah. So I get where you come, I would probably agree with it, but to take it out. but
Yep, I agree with that. Remove residential.
For that reason, but it might cause pain to people reading that.
Let me ask you about the overlay since you brought it up. So you've got that B2 overlay with where you've got some of the, the underlying district is residential. I mean, we may have talked about this already. I think we may have, and I'm sorry. And then you've got other where the underlying district is commercial. So does this mean that all the S's we put in the B2 column here are also allowed on any lot in the overlay, or are we limiting it to the commercial lots only? And maybe that's one you need to think about.
Yeah, but you go back to the idea, if it's legal commercial use, you take the marijuana out of it, it's no different than considering it like a car shop. So are we looking at it different because it's recreational marijuana, or is it commercial and it's allowed in the overlay? Because it's commercial. And if you think about the residential being 300 feet overlay, you could put 250 feet or something in it. If you wanted to put a footage on the residential rather than not having anything, because then it would take the overlay, but it would protect anybody beyond the overlay. Do you know what I'm saying? If there's a protection to be had, I don't know.
And I guess adding the residential, just that singular word,
Yeah,
because what happens in future? Because we're stuck right now looking at what's existing. What happens when a PUD happens and now you're just, by having residential still in it, it's Pandora's box, because what happens downstream, like I said, in one of those primary districts where you have a PUD development where you have residential on top of a commercial. You can
Right.
never get that separation.
True.
exactly. So, but that's what I meant. That's what the
Yeah.
overlay is for.
Yeah.
So
To clean it
I'm
up.
saying it's commercial, it's allowed in the overlay. I'm not gonna say it's marijuana, so therefore it's gotta be so many feet unless you wanna keep it only in the overlay area. Then you would keep it from anything beyond that.
What's
So
everybody else
taking
think?
residential, I don't think matters for me, the other three.
And religious, I guess, I don't know. There's bars right next to churches, but yeah.
Mhm.
But again, you have that
You
you
guys
have that
some
waiver
insight on
language.
this?
They tried the church buffer zone in Grand Rapids, and some of the issues churches actually do waiver, they feel comfortable giving waivers to cannabis businesses, and became a huge debacle. So Grand Rapids.
So they eliminated religious and residential? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would, before that.
I would be, if it's
I
gonna
mean-
cause issues, and everyone can open a church in their house, right?
I guess.
Amen.
Yeah.
Saving money on tax.
Bar next door.
And there's, and what I just learned at another board I'm on is that educational, Gordon property, which is a school, goes all the way to almost to US 23. So you basically are, and there, although that's not an active school, it's owned by the school. Is that that one?
It's an administrative function.
I would say it's, an educational facility, the facility itself.
It was a school, now it's but it could be a school again, I guess, but the property is a long ways away from the school, but it's all part of that property. And
Some of those old schools could become cannabis places.
well, they could.
As a reuse, that's the thing I'm looking at, reusing buildings. Reason.
Well, so how is that distance measured? Is it from the property line or from the building on the property? Does the state law specify
I don't.
for their
I
thousand?
don't
The state law does not. I see municipalities go from property line to property line, from building to building, and also from street frontage, the entrance to one building, the street frontage, taking right angles to the frontage of the other entrance. That's more commonly used in alcohol when we're talking about liquor licenses. And so it's street frontage from entrance, taking right angles to the other property. Or I should say right turns, not right angles.
What's the preference of the planning commission to how that, because I would prefer to specify how that measurement goes.
In the
Well, how
township,
do they do it with
I
the
think we only
liquor
have one
license?
active school in township, don't we?
Maybe
Yeah,
follow what
it's-
they do with liquor
Thanks.
license,
Well,
And
plus Gordon.
Gordon, yeah. But Gordon is not,
if
There's
a
no
liquor
students
store
at
has to
Gordon,
have
but-
a certain amount.
Or the junior high.
oh,
is
junior
in the
high,
township.
yeah.
But that's in a residential area that isn't even allowed the special use. So isn't the distance discalculated? I personally feel, because property lines can be deceiving, go structure to structure, and then
Yep.
that eliminates. the
Yeah, that would be
neighborhood
fine, yeah.
concern.
Yeah, right. That
Plus,
makes
you
more
also
sense.
have that waiver thing, if it's a
Mhm.
little
Yeah.
questionable,
Mhm.
so. Yeah,
You said entrance to entrance, I'm sorry.
Building to building.
Building to building.
Yeah, I would take the church out. In my opinion, we can take the religious out.
I concur.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. And then I have a facility question in terms of grow operations. Are these usually indoors or are there outdoor facilities, grow facilities?
Yes.
We see both of them throughout the state, but more often than they're going to be an indoor grow, especially with the northern aspect, I guess, with Alpena. I would expect indoor grows,
Okay.
but I guess that's up to the city on whether or not or the township, whether or not they think outdoor grows are appropriate.
What do you all think?
well, this is an
Yeah.
ag area, so I
Just
think I'm kind of,
Judging from my time, I lived downstate, the way my tomatoes grew down there outside versus the way they grow outside up here. Yeah, I would expect more indoor grows up here.
But you don't want, I guess what I'm asking is you don't want to prohibit. Are you wanting to prohibit outdoor or just either one is
Well,
fine?
I don't think we should prohibit outdoors because,
Yeah.
but it would have to be some kind of quite a security system to
but
to
the
allow
state,
something like
the
that.
state
Yeah.
does that one.
Yeah, the
They-
state
the
would,
state
yeah.
is
So if we just
huge.
allow it, that's all we
Yeah.
need to do.
Yeah,
We're gonna see more indoor, but if someone wants to try an outdoor, you know what, have at it.
if they, especially if they can pull it off.
I
Yeah.
think you can,
Yeah.
I don't really, I don't have it. Those were my main questions, just in terms of putting together, simplifying this language that you already had in front of you. So, I mean, if anybody else has questions.
Ryan, do you have another comment or go ahead?
You're muted.
Unmute yourself, Ryan.
Yep, I could shed a little light onto the indoor versus outdoor. Because of the strict testing that's done on all the state licensed product in Michigan. And in fact, Michigan is if not the most stringent of the 40 states that have legalized cannabis in one way, shape, or form. It's pretty close. So most of it will be done in an indoor environment to make sure you don't have any mold, and you're really controlling these micro environments to keep out any pests and things. So you're providing a great product. Any outdoor grow that would be done would be beneficial in that you're gonna probably have it in some sort of greenhouse type setup outdoor in order to be successful this far north. It is beneficial because you can use a lot of that product and biomass created there to create your edibles and things like that. And you're essentially pressing or extracting the distillate out of the plant. So it is beneficial for many operators to have that option to go outdoor. It is quite, it would be quite limited, and that's actually a good thing because you can control odor in greenhouses, more effectively, and some other things to make it, less of an issue for residents.
Okay.
I believe
So
one big thing I heard tonight is we need ourselves a cannabis attorney.
Did you hear
We
that?
had a labor attorney. Why wouldn't you have somebody that's an expert in cannabis for representing our township? Something to think about down the road. Unless we got all the answers.
Never have all the answers.
No.
Well, that's the thing. It's not quite tested yet on certain levels. so.
Did you have any other questions, Denise?
No, I think I've got enough info on the zoning side of things to clean up what we were already looking at and send you a different draft.
You have anything to add? We're only looking at them because they have an operation going, so we're just listening, but
No, me too.
yeah.
They don't deny it. They got the operation going. But I think you guys touched on everything.
Okay, that's what was gonna be my question. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that has been a hot button issue or?
Three big things were staying on license. You all covered that 1 year. The other one is.
Well, like the zones,
Yeah,
buffer
that
zones,
is
yeah.
best value as opposed to a.
and the special use permit. Nobody sees a problem with that, Ryan, like a special use, Josh? If we,
I like that approach.
And for us as operators too, it starts to ensure us, you always have in those competitive processes, kind of one or two maybe bad apples that are just trying to tie things up. And for the other operators that were, doing things as they should, the costly delays of getting tied up in some form of litigation, is not good for the municipality, but not good for the vast majority of, potential operators.
costs both a lot of money.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Okay. Good.
And
Ethan, we're good.
if I could too, real quick,
Go ahead.
if there are any questions about cannabis specific law, I'd be more than happy to answer those on behalf of, my client and our project here. Although I'm not the city's attorney, I think, getting off on the right foot's really important. And I'm going to give you a straight 100% honest answer with whatever questions you might present to us. So feel free to reach out after today's meeting. If anybody has a specific question about cannabis law, I'd be more than happy to answer that for you.
Okay, you heard that, Denise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for taking
Thank
the
you.
time.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you all as well.
We're good, Denise?
We're good.
All right. We're adjourned.